And now, please welcome Niall McGee. Niall McGee is a reporter with the Globe and Mail in Toronto. He was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma in June 2014 at the age of 37. Over the next 18 months, he underwent intense treatment, including 50 weeks on a drug called interferon. Niall recently passed the 5-year cancer-free, or as he refers to, NED, no evidence of disease, milestone. Although he spends most of his time writing about business, he has also written 2 in-depth articles about his experience with melanoma. The first, entitled Niall McGee Didn't Believe in Depression, was focused on his experience of becoming severely clinically depressed following the treatment of interferon. The other piece is called Brothers Under the Skin, which is about a remarkable friendship now forged with a fellow melanoma patient named Dwayne Snook. Niall grew up in Ireland and moved to Canada in 1997. He is married and a father of a wonderful 8-year-old boy. Welcome, Niall.
I'll just grab this. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I actually don't know how to use PowerPoint. So firstly, I want to thank Alexa for the invitation. I don't really get invited anywhere much, so true honor. And really enjoyed both the presentations from Dr. Nassim. I mean, I think you're doing amazing work. It's a huge, I think, neglected part of care for the patient, that anxiety and depression are real, and I know firsthand. And Dr. Butler, amazing. I mean, when I was diagnosed in, it was 2011, I know the introduction said 14, but it was 2011, there were literally 0 of these new treatments. I mean, just think about that. It's mind-boggling how many options there are right now, and how many people are surviving with metastatic disease. So I thought I would just sort of tell my story, which is like any individual, very unique, and probably nobody will have my experience again, and I probably wouldn't wish it on a lot of people. But I also want to not only talk about my experience, but maybe things that I learned about having cancer that hopefully will be of use to every patient and not just my very specific situation. So I was diagnosed in June of 2011, and it's funny because the cancer had actually been in my body for a lot longer than that. So I had a very small and seemingly innocent mole on my right arm, and it didn't look like melanoma at all. It was what they call amelanotic. So it was the color of my skin, and so didn't really think much of it, to be honest, for about a year. And eventually my wife encouraged me to go get it checked out. And as I was leaving the dermatologist's office, I sort of asked her what it could be. And she said, well, it's either nothing or it's either a little bit of skin cancer. And so unfortunately, about 2 weeks later, I got the call at work. Remember it like it was yesterday. Told me I had melanoma. They didn't know at that point how advanced it was, and so ultimately went through some surgeries, usual surgeries a lot of patients go through, and eventually they found that I had two positive lymph nodes, so ultimately staged at stage 3B. And then back then, the standard for a stage 3 patient was either go on interferon or basically just wait it out. And I knew that heading into interferon that it was going to be tough, and I knew also that the drug would only give me a little bit of extra percentage points in terms of survival, and a little bit of less chance of it coming back. But I had a very gung-ho attitude, and even if it was only going to give me 1%, I was probably going to do it. So I signed up for it. I knew it was going to be tough. They told me that it would be like having a flu for a year. And also that to, look out for some psychiatric side effects like depression and anxiety, and I sort of brushed those two off, to be honest. I had no history of any depression or anything, and so I was definitely concerned about the physical side effects. So the first few months actually went okay. It was pretty intense. I had 1 month in the hospital, infusions every day for a month, and then the rest of the therapy was outside the hospital. But first 6 months or so, I think things went pretty smooth. I was tolerating the drug pretty well and managing to work part-time and do most of the stuff that I normally do. And with about 3 or 4 months to go on interferon, things started to head south actually in a pretty big way. So I developed a clinical depression, and it sort of snuck up on me out of nowhere, completely blindsided by it, and it got pretty serious pretty fast. And ultimately, I ended up getting so bad that I needed to be hospitalized for depression in, when was it, January of 2013. And yeah, what can I tell you? It was absolutely, sorry, this blowback on this mic is maybe getting a bit annoying. Maybe I'll just reposition it. Maybe that's a bit less annoying for people. So yeah, it was pretty bad, and I had, sorry, I'll just take it back. And I had everyone trying to help me. Like, my wife was coming to the hospital every day and really instrumental in keeping me alive, frankly, and doctors and everything else, and trying all the meds. And at one point, honestly, nothing was working, but I was sort of just staying with it. And eventually discharged from the hospital after about 5 weeks, and then started coming out of it, and then eventually quickly came out of the depression and ultimately recovered. So it was a very, very rough, for sure, couple of months of my life, but I came through it with a lot of support from my family and doctors and everything else. So that was certainly a very difficult thing to go through, but the other sort of story, this is something I've written about in the Globe, is another patient that I went through treatment with. He was actually in a very similar situation as me. We were both stage 3, diagnosed almost on the same day. We were the same age, almost to the day, and we became friends at Sunnybrook, and we went through treatment together. And I think for anyone out there that's meeting fellow patients on the way, it's a great way to feel less alone through the treatment, and really helped me to have his friendship, and we really, I think, helped each other a lot through the treatment. Cruelly for him, his cancer came back towards the end. Actually, while I was in hospital being treated for depression, it was pretty much the worst time that could have happened for both of us, really, because I could not be there for him towards the end, and it was a very cruel end. He was a great guy, and I loved him, and he was just a one in a million guy. But I guess the takeaway is that people you meet through this journey, fellow patients, it can really help and make it easier for people. I guess some of the other stuff that maybe I'll mention that's maybe useful to some people as they go through this, because everyone's situation is so different, but there are maybe some similarities in terms of personality type. So I guess I would describe myself as a like type A guy, and driven and career oriented and all that, and push myself hard. And I think actually in my cancer experience, some of those qualities actually worked against me. And I think I pushed myself too hard during treatment, and probably should have, for example, quit interferon earlier, as my oncologist was pushing me to at one point. but kept going. So I think for the type A's out there, there is that temptation to push and max yourself out, but sometimes it's not a bad idea to back off. Some other things that help me, I think just the realization that this everyone's an individual, and you can kind of get hung up on the stats, and that's certainly something for me. I'm a sort of information junkie. I'm in the sort of news, journalism business, so I read everything, and that's great. But I think that maybe one of the wisest pieces of information that was given to me was by a colleague at a former workplace that he actually had gone through childhood leukemia in the 70s, and very sort of dire situation, but he pulled through and survived. And he just said, you're you. Your story will be different than anyone else's. And so maybe sometimes you see the stats and they're not great, but everyone's going to react differently. And as Dr. Butler sort of alluded to, cancer is at its core, it's a genetic disease, and everyone's it's going to behave differently in everybody, and everyone's going to react differently to the medications, and you're you. Your story's going to be different. Some of the other things, just kind of random stuff, I guess. There's sort of generic pieces of advice that are kind of out there for patients that sometimes they're fine, but sometimes they're, sometimes people say, don't read anything about the disease, and don't look on the internet or anything like that. And I think for some people that's really good advice, and you can get freaked out for sure by reading stuff, but in my case I was actually the opposite of that, and I was really comforted by being able to devour stuff. And for example, The Emperor of All Maladies is a terrific book by a very talented writer, and I actually read that book the week after I was diagnosed. And I've really benefited from educating myself about the disease and all the potential treatments on the horizon. And that's me, but other people maybe not. So I think that do what works for you, ultimately. Just in terms of some other stuff, for me, writing about my experience really helped me. I write for a living, so but I think even if I didn't do that, there's something about putting my story on the page that really helped me process everything that happened, and see things that I had missteps, or places where I had made mistakes, or could have made different choices. And there was just something about the act of writing about my experience that was cathartic and helped me. And other just practical stuff. When you go through cancer, I'm sure a lot of people have had various people reach out and offer help, and sometimes you sort of have to tell people how to help you, because they don't often know. They want to help, but often they just don't know how. So sometimes you actually have to be very specific with people and say, well, yeah, why don't you bring me food on Tuesday night, like next Tuesday? Sometimes you just have to be super specific about how to get people to help you, so to speak, the ones that really do want to help. And other than that, I just wish everyone luck. Attitude is important, but if you don't have a great attitude, that's fine too. There's no actual scientific evidence that attitude kills cancer. So if you're feeling horrible, then it's fine. Feel horrible. I think that everyone needs a bit of luck, ultimately, at the end of the day, especially for people that are stage 4. And I feel for anyone that goes to stage 4, it's a tough situation, but everyone needs some luck. So I wish everyone, basically everyone in the room, a lot of luck as they go through this journey. Thank you so much.